Welcome back to the Biblical Entrepreneur. I'm Hector Alvarez, your host. This is our fourth edition on our continued exploration of faith driven business principles. When I started this podcast, I didn't imagine that it would become more than just a little show or anything like that. Today, I'm going to share something deeply personal, a story that's not about preaching, but about understanding how our most challenging moments can become our greatest strengths. You see, in business and in faith, we often talk about profit and purpose as if they're two opposing forces. But what I've discovered and what I hope to share with you today is that our greatest impact often emerges when we align our entrepreneurial drive with something greater than ourselves. This journey has led me to realize that business can be more than just transactions, it can be transformative. It has resonated so deeply within me and some of those that I've spoken to that I'm actually going to be submitting this to TED with the hopes of being accepted to do a TED Talk. Because I truly believe this conversation needs to reach beyond our usual circles. The world isn't, just hungry for a new paradigm. They need new business leadership. One that doesn't focus just on choosing between profits and purpose, or even between success and service. Let me begin by explaining why personal stories matter in entrepreneurship. Every successful business is not just a collection of strategies or spreadsheets. It's a human journey of overcoming challenges, discovering your purpose, and transforming obstacles into opportunities. When we think about personal growth, we often, imagine a smooth linear path, but reality is far from complex. Picture 1986, I'm a sixth grade student, part of the Gifted and Talented program, which sounds impressive, right? But let me tell you, it wasn't a badge of honor. It was a label that made me feel more isolated than actually being special. So let me break down what that really meant to me. Being labeled as a gifted child isn't always a blessing. It's often a double edged sword that cuts deep into the child's psychological landscape. What appears to be a celebration of intellect can quickly become a burden of extraordinary expectations, social isolation, and intense internal pressure. These children frequently find themselves caught between advanced intellectual capabilities and the normal emotional development of their peers, creating a profound sense of disconnection. The gifted label can transform a child from a natural learner into a performance machine where academic achievement becomes their primary identity. And it overshadows everything from personal growth, emotional intelligence, and the simple joys of childhood. Ironically, the very designation meant to recognize potential can become a restrictive framework that limits exploration, creativity, and authentic self discovery. As these children learn to navigate a world that sees them more as intellectual specimens than even just that of complex humans. Universities will send specialists to test me, to measure my intelligence. Um, Imagine being a kid trapped in a small room, surrounded by people trying to quantify your potential. I didn't want to be a number, I just wanted to be me. These tests weren't just academic exercises, they were emotional experiences that made me feel isolated, transforming what should have been an intellectual assessment into a deeply personal psychological landscape of alienation. Imagine being a child pulled from your classroom environment, separated from peers, and placed in testing rooms where specialists scrutinize your every intellectual response. These weren't simple multiple choice exams, but complex evaluations designed to map the intricate contours of your cognitive potential. It's like it was insane. Later on, the bulliness was just relentless. I mean, in the second grade, something happened that would define me for so many years. And it made me something that I don't know if it was good or bad, but I have to understand that it transpired because of these things. See, let me explain. It's like the psychological impact of being bullied. I experienced a moment that I was, going to reshape my whole entire understanding of personal strength. One day in second grade, seven kids attacked me during recess, a traumatic experience that could have defined me as a victim. But instead, it became a transformative moment. Something inside me just refused to be defeated. I fought them off and found myself sitting on the ground crying, bleeding, and broken. Proverbs 24:16 became an unintentional motto. For though the righteous fall 7 times, they rise again. Even then, without fully understanding it, I was living this principle. These are ideals I now see in what I was experiencing And this wasn't the thought process of the time, of course. I wish it would have been. But now I see it as that. The psychological landscape of a physical confrontation reveals a complex, multi layered internal experience that transcends just simple physical survival. At its core, the experience becomes a profound journey through the deepest recesses of a human mind and resilience, where each dimension, physical confrontation, emotional vulnerability, unexpected inner strength, and survival instinct intertwines to create a transformative psychological response. The physical confrontation represents the external challenge, the violent disruption of a personal safety that triggers an immediate psychological and physiological stress response. It floods the body with adrenaline, cortisol, and just preparing you to fight or run. Simultaneously, emotionally, you become vulnerable. It emerges as a raw, unfiltered experience of fear, exposure and potential defeat. A moment where there's one fundamental sense of security is just violently challenged. Yet within the crucible of threat, an unexpected inner strength begins to crystallize, rising from a primal, let's say almost inexplicable, but psychological alchemy that transforms vulnerability into resilience, fear into a focused determination. The survival instinct becomes the conductor of this internal orchestra, synthesizing physical reflexes, emotional processing, and cognitive strategy into a unified response. It's a moment where the human spirit demonstrates its most remarkable, capacity, capabilities. It's able to transform a potential trauma into a narrative of survival, to find power in the most vulnerable of moments, and to redefine personal limitations through an extraordinary internal resource that defies simple explanation. My journey took a traumatic turn, with seemingly just a simple gym class. Um, I got injured. It was a simple injury at the time, you would think, but what medical professionals initially described as a potentially permanent disability became a narrative of miraculous recovery. Um, I was doing a basketball layup in class, and unfortunately, I fell. It was an injury that the doctor said would leave me permanently disabled and in a wheelchair. I was confined to this chair for quite a long time, and I was facing a future that I just honestly would have never imagined, and I couldn't even fathom at the time. But there's so much more in that, but I'd rather just get to the point of really what this means. This is where my story started to take a little bit of a turn, an unexpected one at that. You see, at Hinchcliffe Stadium in Patterson, New Jersey, there was a gentleman named Gigi Avila. He was a very well-known Puerto Rican evangelist, extremely well-known, in fact, and very good. I loved his preaching, even though I was very young at the time. I enjoyed it, and that day at the stadium, I recall that I had to go through so many things just to get in because it was so full. And I'm coming in a wheelchair. I had crutches, of course, so I could, try to move around, but it wasn't easy. I had nowhere to sit. They couldn't figure out what they would do with me. At the time, Mr. Pane, which was my second grade teacher, he comes up to us. He was part of our church, and somehow, some way, he was able to convince someone to take me to the front of the actual stadium, to where they had the stage set up where Gigi Avila was going to be preaching. And I found myself right at the very feet of this man, just looking up, as he was preaching. So that day, I was surrounded by faith and hope. I mean, I experienced a healing that defied medical expectations that day, believe it or not. He preached over me. He preached, and of course, he prayed over me. And believe it or not, that same day, I ran out. I didn't walk out of the stadium, actually. I ran out of the stadium, leaving the wheelchair behind, literally carrying my crutches as I was running out. And I left them there, left the wheelchair, which was supposed to be my permanent companion for life. It was just left behind. I never used that wheelchair again. As Isaiah 40:31 says, they're just not words. In reality, there's so much more. It says, those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. I was living proof of that day, at least. At least within myself, I feel. Now, you're probably wondering, okay, so how does a childhood story connect to entrepreneurship? The truth of the reality is they're fundamentally the same journey. You see, in business, you're going to face all types of moments that are going to seem insurmountable. Like market challenges can often feel like formidable opponents, much like a seasoned warrior facing an army that seems insurmountably larger and more powerful. Imagine standing at the edge of a competitive landscape where economic shifts, technological disruptions, and aggressive competitors appear to conspire against your business's survival. These challenges might manifest as sudden regulatory changes that undermine your current business model, emerging technologies that render your products obsolete literally overnight, or a well-funded competitor who just, gets to outspend and outmaneuver you at every single turn. It's just a strategic military commander trying to take over your whole entire battlefield. It analyzes weaknesses and develops innovative tactics. Entrepreneurs must approach market challenges with a combination of adaptive thinking, resilient strategy, and unwavering determination. The most successful business leaders don't view these challenges as insurmountable walls, but as complex puzzles waiting to be solved. Never look at the problem, just look straight through to the solution. Because the opportunities demonstrate, creativity, agility, and strategic insight. They understand that every seemingly overwhelming opponent contains within it some type of potential weakness. Alternative pathways and unexplored opportunities can be leveraged with careful analysis, bold thinking and willingness to just maneuver and pivot out of the way when traditional approaches no longer work for you. Then you have financial pressures that can be the inevitable invisible chains that bind entrepreneurs, creating a paralyzing sense of limitation, much like the wheelchair in a physical recovery journey. These pressures emerge as complex web of cash flow challenges, mounting debt, unexpected expenses, and the constant fear of financial collapse that can seemingly immobilize your business dreams. Just as a physical disability can restrict movement, financial constraints can create a psychological barrier that prevents you from taking risks, very necessary risks, from exploring new opportunities or investing in critical growth strategies. Imagine standing at the precipice of a potentially transformative business move, only to be held back by the weight of outstanding loans, minimal working capital, or the constant uncertainty of whether the next invoice will be paid on time. These financial limitations can create a mindset of survival rather than growth, and where every single decision becomes a calculated risk between maintaining current operations and potentially risking everything on a new venture. Successful entrepreneurs learn to view these financial pressures not as permanent disabilities, but as temporary challenges to be navigated with a creative financial management, strategic planning, unwavering belief in the ability to generate value within yourself. They develop multiple revenue streams, negotiate intelligently with creditors, they seek alternative funding resources. More importantly, they maintain a mental resilience to see beyond current financial constraints towards the broader vision of their true business potential. You see, doubts. I'm sure we've all faced them, right? Doubts are the silent, saboteurs of potential. Insidious whispers that creep into your mind at, not just yours, but every single entrepreneur. It threatens to rewrite the narrative of what's possible before it can even be imagined. These doubts manifest as internal dialogues that challenge your most internal fundamental beliefs about your capabilities, your creative invisible barriers, more restrictive than any physical limitation. They sound like persistent questions. Am I good enough? Do I really have what it takes? What if I'm just, fooling myself, tricking myself? Each doubt acts like a small weight, gradually accumulating and just building up until it burdens so much and so heavy that the self-question becomes something more than you could bear. It prevents you from taking the very actions that could prove everything wrong. Imagine potential as a vast uncharted landscape, and doubts as a fog that obscures the paths forward. It marks every step. It seems uncertain in every direction, potentially treacherous. Yet, the most transformative entrepreneurs learn to see these doubts as not definitive statements about their limitations, but as invitations to prove their inner, critics wrong. We're our worst critique. We literally kill ourselves. They understand that doubt is not a verdict, but a challenge, a psychological test that, when confronted with courage and strategic thinking, can actually become the very catalyst for unprecedented growth and self discovery. The moment you recognize that doubts are merely unexamined assumptions rather than immutable truths, you begin to actually dismantle their power. You transform them into, from these paralyzing barriers into a fuel for resilience, innovation, and actual personal breakthrough. You know, this is what I've learned. Your greatest limitations are often the stories you tell yourself. You build and break yourself. So depending on what you tell yourself, that's who you're going to be. Philippians chapter 4:13. I can do all things through him who gives me strength. It's not just a motivational quote, it's an actual strategic mindset. In today's business landscape, the concept of purpose beyond profit represents a fundamental shift in how organizations define success and create value. While traditional business models focused primarily on maximizing shareholder returns, forward-thinking companies now recognize that their societal impact extends far beyond financial metrics. This evolved perspective acknowledges that businesses operate within a complex web of stakeholders, including employees, communities, the environment, and future generations. Each deserving careful consideration in strategic decision making. Companies embracing this philosophy might invest in renewable energy infrastructure, implement fair labor practices, donate to the community, bring up, others and help them be successful. Or they'll dedicate services, across addressing personal issues, social challenges. So even when these initiatives don't immediately contribute to the bottom line, the remarkable aspect of this approach is that organizations often discover that pursuing purpose-driven objectives enhances their long-term financial sustainability. As consumers increasingly favor brands that align themselves with these values, employees show greater engagement when their work environment has a meaning. And innovation flourishes when companies seek solutions that help societies. This evolution in business thinking suggests that profit and purpose need not be mutually exclusive. Rather, they can form a virtuous cycle where commercial success enables greater positive impact. And real, true, meaningful contributions to society build stronger, more resilient businesses. Entrepreneurship isn't about just simply making money. It's about solving real world problems, creating meaningful opportunities, supporting communities, reflecting principles of integrity and compassion. When I approach business, I see more than transactions. I see potential for transformation. Colossians chapter 3, verse 23 and 24. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters. I'm not here to convert you. I'm here to share a story, of overcoming, of finding purpose, of understanding that our challenges are our greatest teachers. To every entrepreneur, every dreamer feeling stuck, your current situation is not your final destination. Setbacks are not stop signs, they're redirections. Joshua 1:9, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. This journey isn't about being perfect. It's about being persistent. Your greatest asset isn't your skills, your capital, or your connections. It's your ability to rise, to adapt, to believe in something greater than yourself. Your story still is actually being written. And the most powerful chapters, they're often the ones that you least expect. So until next week, this is Hector Alvarez reminding you that in both business and in faith, our true calling extends beyond earthly rewards. Just as our Father's house welcomes all who return, our businesses can be sanctuaries where purpose and profit work in divine harmony, where we create value not just for shareholders, but for all of God's children. Every transaction can be an act of service, every business decision an opportunity to demonstrate His love. May your work be worship, and may your business be a blessing, transforming not just balance sheets, but the very lives we touch. Remember, it's never too late to return to your Father's house. It's never too late to align your business with His greater purpose. God bless.